Most people are conditioned to believe that power comes from speaking louder, explaining more, proving themselves, or defending their position at all costs. From a young age, we're taught that if someone misunderstands us, we must correct them, and if someone pulls away, we must chase. But real power operates in the opposite direction. True strength is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, justify itself, or beg to be recognized. Silence, when chosen consciously, is not weakness, it is emotional mastery. When you stop reacting impulsively, you immediately separate yourself from the average man. The average man explains, pleads, argues, and tries to convince others of his worth. He thinks that if he just says the right words, sends the right message, or expresses his feelings more clearly, the outcome will change. But the reality is that words spoken from a place of insecurity only reinforce weakness. Silence, on the other hand, signals confidence. It shows that you are comfortable with uncertainty, that you trust yourself enough not to chase validation. Silence is powerful because it removes you from emotional chaos. When emotions run high, most people lose control. They say things they regret, reveal insecurities, and give away leverage. Silence keeps you centered. It allows you to observe instead of react, to think instead of panic, and to maintain dignity when others lose theirs. In moments of conflict or distance, the man who can remain calm and quiet instantly becomes the strongest presence in the room, even if he says nothing at all. There is also a psychological weight to silence that words simply cannot match. When you argue or explain, you give the other person something to push against. They can twist your words, dismiss your feelings, or use your explanations against you. Silence offers no resistance. It creates a vacuum, and humans hate vacuums. When you stop talking, the other person is forced to fill the silence with their own thoughts, doubts, and emotions. They start replaying conversations in their head. They wonder what you're thinking. They question their assumptions. Silence forces reflection. This is why silence is often misunderstood. People mistake it for indifference or weakness because they don't understand emotional strength. In reality, silence requires far more discipline than speaking. It takes strength to hold your tongue when you feel misunderstood. It takes confidence to walk away without defending yourself. It takes self-respect to accept that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, explanations, or emotions. Silence is not avoidance, it is selectivity. When you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided how they see you, you reclaim your power. You stop auditioning for approval. You stop trying to be chosen. Instead, you choose yourself, and that shift changes everything. The moment you no longer need to be understood, you become far more respected. People sense when someone is emotionally self-sufficient. They feel it in the energy, in the calmness, in the lack of desperation. Silence also communicates boundaries without confrontation. You don't need to announce your standards or argue about your worth. Walking away quietly sends a clearer message than any speech ever could. It says, I know who I am, and I will not participate in dynamics that diminish me. That message lands far deeper than words because it's backed by action. And action is always louder than talk. Another reason silence is so powerful is that it prevents emotional leakage. When you talk too much, especially under stress, you reveal fears, attachments, and insecurities. Silence keeps your inner world protected. It allows you to process emotions privately instead of outsourcing them to someone who may not care or may even use them against you. A man who can sit with his emotions without dumping them onto others develops inner stability, and that stability is rare. Silence also forces growth. When you stop seeking external reassurance, you're pushed inward. You learn to soothe self, validate, and self-correct. You become less reactive and more intentional. Over time, this builds unshakable confidence, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet certainty that doesn't need applause. This is the confidence that people feel rather than hear. In relationships, silence can be especially transformative. When someone expects you to chase, explain, or fight for attention, and you instead remain calm and grounded, the dynamic shifts. You break the pattern, you stop feeding emotional games, and suddenly your presence becomes valuable again, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped overgiving. Silence restores balance. It's important to understand that silence is not about manipulation or punishment. It's not about giving someone the silent treatment out of spite. That kind of silence comes from ego and insecurity. Powerful silence comes from self-respect. It's the silence of a man who knows when speaking adds value and when it only drains energy. It's the silence of someone who refuses to argue with disrespect, chase disinterest, or explain himself to people who aren't listening. The strongest men in history understood this principle. They spoke less and observed more. They chose their words carefully and valued restraint. In a world full of noise, restraint becomes dominance. When everyone else is reacting emotionally, the calm man stands out. When everyone else is begging to be heard, the silent man commands attention without asking for it. Silence also sharpens your awareness. When you're not busy talking, you notice patterns. You see people for who they really are, not who they pretend to be. You hear what isn't being said. This awareness gives you an edge in every area of life: relationships, business, leadership, and personal growth. Silence turns you into a student of human behavior. Most importantly, silence strengthens your relationship with yourself. When you stop explaining your choices to the world, you begin living more authentically. You stop performing. You stop seeking permission. You trust your instincts, and the more you trust yourself, the less you need external validation. That's real freedom. Silence teaches patience, it teaches emotional regulation, it teaches confidence under pressure, and over time it transforms you into someone whose presence alone carries weight. You don't need to announce your value, people feel it. You don't need to prove your strength, it's visible in your restraint. And you don't need to chase respect, it follows naturally when you stop giving it away. The moment you decide to walk away instead of chasing, pleading, or trying to fix something that isn't meeting you halfway, a powerful internal shift takes place. Most people don't realize how much power they hand over when they stay in situations where they are undervalued. They believe endurance equals strength, that loyalty means tolerating disrespect, or that persistence will eventually earn appreciation. In reality, power belongs to the person who can leave without resentment, without drama, and without needing closure from someone else. Walking away is not an act of weakness or defeat. It is a declaration of self-worth. It says you understand that your time, energy, and emotional investment are valuable and limited. When you remain in a dynamic where effort is one-sided, you teach others that your boundaries are flexible and your standards are negotiable. The instant you walk away, those unspoken lessons disappear. You no longer reward indifference with attention. You no longer validate disrespect with patience. You reclaim authority over your life. Most men struggle with walking away because it triggers fear, fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of being replaced, or fear of not being enough. These fears push them to overinvest. They text too much, explain too often, and compromise their values just to keep someone around. But every act of chasing reinforces the belief that the other person is the prize and you are not. Walking away reverses that belief. It places you back in the position of chooser rather than applicant. Power dynamics are shaped by who needs whom more. The person who can walk away without collapsing emotionally holds the leverage. This isn't about manipulation. It's about emotional independence. When you stop needing a specific outcome to feel whole, you become grounded. That grounded energy is unmistakable. People sense when someone is not desperate for approval or validation, and that alone commands respect. Walking away also disrupts expectations. When someone is used to you always being available, always trying, always fixing things, your absence creates contrast. Suddenly, they feel the weight of what they took for granted. Your silence forces them to experience the consequences of their behavior without you explaining it. And consequences are the only language that truly changes behavior. Words can be ignored, distance cannot. There is a deep psychological impact when you walk away calmly, no arguments, no emotional outbursts, no long goodbye speeches, just a quiet exit. This leaves the other person alone with their thoughts. They replay interactions, question their assumptions, and reassess your value. Not because you begged them to, but because your absence made space for reflection. That reflection would never happen if you stayed and kept talking. Walking away also restores your internal balance. When you remain in unhealthy dynamics, your nervous system stays in a constant state of stress. You overthink messages, analyze tone, and wait for responses. This drains mental and emotional energy that could be invested in your purpose, growth, and mission. Leaving frees that energy. Your focus returns to what you can control yourself. One of the most powerful aspects of walking away is that it eliminates resentment. When you stay too long, resentment builds quietly. You start expecting others to change, to appreciate you, to finally see your worth. And when they don't, bitterness follows. Walking away early preserves your self-respect. You leave before you become someone you don't recognize, needy, angry, or emotionally reactive. Walking away also clarifies standards. It forces you to define what you will and will not tolerate. Instead of complaining about behavior you don't like, you simply remove yourself from it. This is the highest form of boundary setting. You don't argue your boundaries, you live them, and people learn quickly how to treat you based on what you accept and what you walk away from. Another overlooked aspect is that walking away strengthens your identity. Each time you choose yourself over approval, you reinforce the belief that you are enough. This compounds over time. Your confidence becomes internal rather than situational. You no longer feel powerful only when someone wants you. You feel powerful because you trust yourself to walk away from anything that compromises your peace. Walking away also shifts your mindset from scarcity to abundance. Scarcity says, "This is my only chance. I can't afford to lose this." Abundance says, "If this isn't aligned, something better will come." When you operate from abundance, you stop clinging. You stop forcing connections. You allow life to meet you where you are instead of chasing outcomes that drain you. It's important to understand that walking away doesn't guarantee someone will come back, and that's the point. The real power is that you no longer need them to. Whether they reflect, return, or disappear becomes irrelevant. You win because you chose self-respect over attachment. You chose growth over comfort. You chose long-term strength over short-term relief. Walking away also builds emotional discipline. It teaches you to tolerate discomfort without acting impulsively. You learn that feelings pass, urges fade, and clarity comes with time. This discipline spills into every area of your life: business, health, leadership, and purpose. A man who can walk away from what feels good in the moment but is bad in the long run becomes unstoppable. In many cases, walking away actually elevates your value in the eyes of others. not because you tried to appear valuable, but because you demonstrated it. Value is revealed through behavior, not words. When you refuse to chase what doesn't choose you, you communicate confidence, self-trust, and emotional maturity. These traits are rare, and rarity creates value. There is also peace in walking away that cannot be overstated. Peace comes from alignment when your actions match your values. Staying in situations that drain you creates internal conflict. Leaving resolves it. You may feel pain initially, but beneath that pain is relief. Relief that you are no longer betraying yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Ultimately, walking away is an act of leadership. You lead yourself first. You show yourself that your well-being matters. And once you lead yourself, others either rise to meet you or fall away. Either outcome is a win. When you walk away with calm certainty, you reclaim your power at the deepest level. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop waiting to be chosen. You become the man who chooses his standards, his direction, and his future. And that kind of power doesn't come from control over others. It comes from control over yourself. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood concepts when it comes to personal power, respect, and attraction. Many people confuse detachment with coldness, indifference, or emotional unavailability. In reality, true detachment is emotional balance. It is the ability to care without clinging, to desire without needing, and to stay grounded regardless of someone else's behavior. When you master detachment, you stop being controlled by external outcomes, and that alone changes how people respond to you. Most people lose respect and attraction not because they care too much, but because they need too much. Neediness shows up subtly in overtexting, over-explaining, seeking reassurance, and reacting emotionally to uncertainty. These behaviors signal insecurity and emotional dependence. Detachment removes that signal. When you are detached, you are no longer trying to extract validation from someone else. You are simply present, calm, and self-contained. That energy is deeply attractive because it feels safe and grounded. Respect is built when people know you won't abandon yourself to keep them. Detachment communicates that you have a full life, a strong sense of identity, and priorities beyond one relationship or outcome. You're not trying to lock someone down or control their choices. You allow them the freedom to be who they are, while retaining the freedom to walk away if their behavior doesn't align with your standards. That balance between openness and boundaries creates respect. One of the strongest psychological effects of detachment is that it creates space. Space allows others to feel, think, and choose. When you are emotionally attached, you crowd the dynamic with expectations, pressure, and urgency. This often pushes people away, even if they initially cared. Detachment removes pressure. It says, I enjoy you, but I don't need you to complete me. And that message changes the entire tone of the interaction. Attraction thrives in freedom. When someone feels free to choose you rather than obligated or pressured, their interest becomes genuine. Detachment gives them that freedom. You stop monitoring their behavior for signs of approval or rejection. You stop trying to control the outcome. Ironically, the less you try to hold on, the more people feel drawn back toward you. Detachment also activates a psychological phenomenon known as the absence effect. When you pull back emotionally and stop overinvesting, your presence becomes more noticeable by its absence. People begin to feel the contrast between when you were fully engaged and when you're no longer chasing or seeking validation. This contrast often triggers curiosity and reflection. They begin to reassess your value not because you asked them to, but because your energy changed. Another key aspect of detachment is emotional self-regulation. When you detach, you stop allowing someone else's mood, attention, or decisions to dictate your emotional state. You are no longer riding an emotional roller coaster. This stability is rare and powerful. People naturally respect those who can remain calm and centered regardless of circumstances. Emotional volatility repels, emotional consistency attracts, detachment also protects your dignity. When you care too much about an outcome, you're more likely to compromise your values, tolerate disrespect, or act out of character. Detachment keeps you aligned with who you truly are. It allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. You don't lash out, beg, or seek revenge. You simply adjust your investment based on how you're treated. This is where detachment becomes magnetic. People are drawn to those who are not trying to win them over. When you stop performing for approval, you become authentic. Authenticity builds trust, trust builds comfort. And comfort, combined with mystery, fuels attraction. Detachment doesn't make you distant, it makes you real. Detachment also shifts your focus inward. Instead of obsessing over someone else's actions, you invest in your growth, purpose, and mission. You become more engaged with your life. This naturally makes you more attractive because you're building something meaningful. People are drawn to those who are passionate about their path, not those who revolve around others. It's important to understand that detachment is not something you fake. It must be genuine. You can't pretend not to care while secretly hoping for a reaction. That energy is felt. True detachment comes from self-worth. It comes from knowing that you will be okay regardless of the outcome. That inner certainty is what people respond to. When detachment is authentic, it removes emotional manipulation from the equation. You're not withdrawing to punish or provoke. You're simply honoring your boundaries. This creates healthy dynamics. Either the other person steps up and meets you with equal effort, or they drift away, and both outcomes are beneficial. You either build something balanced, or you create space for something better. Detachment also makes your yes a more valuable. When you're not always available emotionally, your presence carries weight. People appreciate what isn't guaranteed. When you choose to invest, it feels intentional rather than desperate. This intentionality builds respect and deepens connection. Another powerful effect of detachment is that it encourages mutual effort. When you stop overgiving, others are forced to show up or fall away. You no longer carry the emotional load alone. This reveals who is truly aligned with you and who was only comfortable when you were doing all the work. Detachment also strengthens your intuition. When you're not emotionally overwhelmed, you see situations clearly. You pick up on red flags earlier. You trust your instincts. This clarity helps you make better decisions, not just in relationships, but in all areas of life. Ultimately, detachment is about freedom, freedom from emotional dependency, freedom from fear of loss, and freedom from the need for control. When you are free, you are powerful, and when you are powerful, you are naturally respected and desired. Detachment doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love healthier. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you grounded. And it doesn't push the right people away. It filters out the wrong ones. When you master detachment, your energy changes. You stop chasing, you stop proving, you stop fearing loss, and in that space, respect grows, attraction deepens, and your presence becomes something people feel even when you're not there. Most people believe the ultimate win in life is getting someone back, being chosen, or proving their value to others. They measure success by external outcomes, attention, validation, reconciliation, or approval. But real power doesn't come from controlling outcomes, it comes from mastering yourself. Self-mastery is the foundation of confidence, peace, and long-term long-term success, and it is built through discipline, emotional regulation, and alignment with your values. When you reach a point where you no longer need external validation to feel whole, you become unshakable. Self-mastery begins with awareness. You start noticing your emotional triggers instead of being ruled by them. Instead of reacting impulsively when you feel ignored, rejected, or disrespected, you pause. That pause is power. In that moment, you choose how to respond rather than letting emotions dictate your behavior. Most people never develop this skill, which is why they stay stuck in cycles of regret, overreaction, and self-betrayal. Mastery is choosing the long-term benefit over short-term emotional relief. One of the clearest signs of self-mastery is restraint. You no longer say everything you feel. You no longer act on every urge. You understand that not every emotion deserves expression, and not every thought deserves action. This restraint doesn't suppress emotions, it channels them. You allow yourself to feel fully without letting feelings control your decisions. Over time, this creates emotional stability, which is the backbone of inner strength. When you stop needing someone else to validate your worth, your behavior changes naturally. You no longer chase attention or seek reassurance. You don't over-explain or try to prove yourself. You move with quiet certainty. This inner shift is visible to others, even if they can't articulate it. People sense when someone is emotionally self-sufficient. They feel safer, more relaxed, and more respectful around someone who isn't desperate for approval. Self-mastery also means aligning your actions with your values, even when it's uncomfortable. It's easy to talk about standards when things are going well. It's much harder to live by them when emotions are involved. Walking away from disrespect, choosing silence over argument, and choosing dignity over ego are all acts of mastery. Each time you choose alignment over attachment, you strengthen your self-respect, and self-respect compounds. Another key aspect of self-mastery is accepting loss without bitterness. When you're attached to outcomes, loss feels like failure. When you're grounded in self-mastery, loss becomes information. You don't take it personally. You don't spiral into self-doubt. You reflect, learn, and move forward. This mindset allows you to grow from experiences rather than being defined by them. Self-mastery also changes how you view rejection. Rejection stops being a verdict on your worth and becomes redirection. You understand that not every door closing is a punishment. Sometimes it's protection. This perspective removes fear from your decisions. You're no longer afraid to be authentic because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes next. As you develop self-mastery, your standards naturally rise. You become more selective with your time, energy, and emotional investment. You stop tolerating chaos, inconsistency, and disrespect. Not because you're bitter, but because you value peace. This selectivity isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. And people respond to it accordingly. Self-mastery also builds resilience. When your sense of worth is internal, external fluctuations lose their power over you. Praise doesn't inflate your ego, and criticism doesn't destroy you. You remain centered regardless of circumstances. This emotional resilience is rare, and it commands respect in every environment, relationships, work, and leadership. Another powerful outcome of self-mastery is clarity. When you're not emotionally reactive, you see situations as they are, not as you wish they were. You make decisions based on reality, not hope or fear. This clarity saves you from wasted time and emotional exhaustion. It allows you to invest in what truly aligns with you. Self-mastery also strengthens your sense of purpose. When you stop chasing validation, You have more energy to focus on your mission. You begin building a life that excites you rather than one that seeks approval. Purpose becomes your anchor, and a man anchored in purpose is naturally confident because his identity isn't tied to anyone else's opinion. One of the most liberating aspects of self-mastery is emotional independence. You enjoy connection without needing it. You appreciate love without clinging to it. This independence doesn't isolate you, it enhances your relationships. You show up as a complete person, not as someone looking to be completed. That wholeness creates healthier, more balanced connections. Self-mastery also teaches patience. You learn that timing matters, that growth takes time, and that forcing outcomes often backfires. You trust the process, you trust yourself, and that trust eliminates desperation. When desperation disappears, your presence becomes calm and grounded, qualities that naturally attract respect. Ultimately, the true win is becoming someone you respect. When you can look at your actions and know you stayed true to yourself, regardless of the outcome, you gain something far more valuable than attention or approval. You gain integrity, and integrity is the foundation of lasting confidence. When you master yourself, you no longer need to control others. You no longer need reassurance. You no longer fear loss. You move through life with quiet strength, clear boundaries, and emotional discipline. And that is real power. The paradox is that once you stop needing validation, it often comes naturally. But even if it doesn't, you're still winning, because the greatest achievement isn't being chosen by others, it's choosing yourself every single day.